So let's just take a little look at this obviously staged story that's coming out through all of the Canadian Mockingbird media sources, talking about this supposed sting with these arrests of Toronto police officers for corruption and ties to organized crime and things of that nature. Obviously, all this is, if you understand how these systems operate and how the Canadian communitarian system operates, it's simply a smokescreen that they're putting up. They're putting this out there as damage control, because obviously there are some people who are starting to wake up to police involvement in drug trafficking and organized crime. And another way that we can firmly establish that what is going on here is contrived and staged is that it's getting all of this major press coverage from the controlled propaganda networks throughout Canada, who are essentially told what to say, given scripts by our intelligence services, by the Five Eyes intelligence services, who are also regularly involved in setting up these major staged events in coordination with these controlled Mockingbird media news organizations, where they stage fake terror events, lying about all of these events, and using community-based agents as actors to work alongside police to deceive the public into thinking that there are all these horrible events going on, so that they will be more willing to relinquish their basic rights and freedoms and accept a surveillance state and accept a surveillance system with armed police carrying automatic rifles everywhere to protect them from non-existent terror threats, using the Hegelian dialectic, which is what these criminal Freemasons always use. They create and manufacture the problems themselves, and that always involves using these state-funded Mockingbird propaganda media networks and the criminal police, firefighters, and others staging fake events. They use them because, unfortunately, after over years, the public still has trust in these psychotic criminals, not knowing fully that all of the decent people have been removed from their positions in these organizations, and these are completely controlled organizations, controlled by Freemasonry. And all of the prominent male officers are Freemasons, and they simply take instructions and are told what to do and say. And they facilitate organized crime and drug trafficking, and all of these people who are supposedly exposing this, it's just a sideshow and a front and a smokescreen, because they're all involved in it too. So you have a group of Freemasons with the York Region Police pretending to expose a bunch of Freemasons in the Toronto Police, just to create a smokescreen, basically just to do damage control. And part of that is some of the material that I've put out, talking about this very openly. They weren't putting things like this out in the press too regularly before. You might have noticed that. And you might have noticed also that whenever I mentioned police involvement in drug trafficking, which is clear and obvious and can be proven beyond any shadow of a doubt, and I mean all Canadian Freemason police. And you might as well just refer to them as the Freemason police, because that's who they are. They only represent Freemasonry. They're only in their positions, all of the prominent officers, because of Freemasonry. They lie continually on behalf of Freemasonry. They stage fake events and traffic narcotics on behalf of Freemasonry. So Freemasonry dictates what they're to do and say, and all of these important reporters, the male reporters, you'll see them on these news shows wearing their purple ties, representing Freemasonry, while they put out these propaganda pieces to attempt to deceive the public into thinking that there's some real action taken to correct these things, when in reality, there's no action being taken. This is all staged. It's also important to note that all of these other sources as well in the fake, contrived, so-called alternative media in Canada, these people who they lie to you and tell you are citizen journalists, these auditors who go out, and these Freemason auditors who go out and stage fake interactions with the police and constantly stage fake altercations so that the police can justify, attempting to justify enacting new laws to remove people's rights to film their criminal activities in public. you can tell all of those frauds are going around talking about this as if it was real too. So Rebel News is reporting on it as if it was real, in the same way the Canadian Mockingbird media is reporting on it as if it's real. And a little while back they had that guy, what's his name, Mad Mossad Press or whatever, the guy who claims to be a former Toronto cop. Although the former is probably a lie, he's probably still a Toronto cop. And that guy who for some reason just gets all of this press coverage when no one who's legitimate, who exposes police corruption, will get talked about in the mainstream media, because they know that any exposure is good exposure. Any coverage is good coverage, even if they're slandering you, because it brings attention to what you're saying. So he's definitely a fraud, and you can see that guy making satanic Freemasonic hand signals in a number of videos, which I put out as well. So they have him going around talking about these arrests as if they're real, also working to deceive the public into thinking that something is being done about this corruption. But you can tell for sure that that's false, and that there are going to be no real arrests, and there will be no real trials, and none of these officers will do real prison time. The way you'll be able to tell for sure that all of this is staged is that the corruption and the drug trafficking and the crime will simply continue as they were before. They just put this out there to attempt to deceive people into thinking that their organizations aren't completely corrupt and rotten to the core and completely run by Freemasonry and the criminals above them with the crown controlling things, with the symbol of the crown on all of their uniforms. So let's move ahead here and listen to some of these lies and nonsense regarding this stage play that they've set up here to create the illusion of transparency and to try to deceive people into thinking that some of the Freemason police are somehow exposing their Masonic brothers, who they're not allowed to speak ill about, right? They've taken oaths to their Masonic lodges that don't allow them to do things like this, to expose their brothers. So we know it's not real. We know it's completely fake. None of these people will do any prison time, and this is nothing more than staged theater. And so this is from CTV News here. Father and son duo, part of 8 officers charged in York Region Police. And if you've done any research on the Canadian communitarian system, you know they use families. That's why, you know, if the father was a cop, you know, a lot of times their son will become a cop too. So they can ensure that they have corrupt Freemasons in all of these positions for generations who will simply do exactly what the state tells them to do. They will lie about anything. They'll exploit their own children. They'll exploit the elderly. They'll partake in staged events where they pretend children died just to push ahead these agendas that the state wants them to push ahead. They're psychopaths with no empathy, but they will protect each other since they're all involved in organized crime together, and so it's in their best interest to protect each other. So let's listen to what the Masonic-controlled nonsense Canadian media has to say about this.
John Woodward in studio tonight.
And you can see John Woodward here. Let's just point out, sorry this is shaking a bit, I'm recording it with my phone. You can see John Woodward wearing his purple tie for Freemasonry that so many of these other fake controlled journalists, just like David Menzies for Rebel News, regularly wears that purple tie, purple being colors representing what Masons wear at the lodges, and not all the time, but again, it's one of the primary colors representing Masonry, and you can see him wearing his purple tie. So you know he's going to be telling the truth here.
And their alleged crimes.
Yeah, Nathan, some of these names are new. Some of them have come up before. People charged in shootings apparently connected to a well-known tow truck kingpin, as well as a father and son duo, both police officers.
3 generations in a storied police family with the same name.
So you're John Madeley?
Yes, I am.
And you are?
John Madeley.
And you are?
John Madeley.
A retired detective, a constable, and a recruit.
And are all of these individuals Masons? Well, CTV News doesn't think that's relevant, and they're not going to ask any questions about that. I wonder why. You wonder why they're not going to ask any questions about how all of these people in the same families are being put into this organization. And we know that the vast majority of these male cops are Masons, but somehow CTV News can't make the connection between all of these organized crime connections and Freemasonry and the police. Isn't that convenient? Especially when the reporter's wearing a purple tie.
Oh, it's the proudest day of my life. I'm ready to go. I'm excited.
The 55-year-old Madeley just retired under a cloud, accused earlier this year of a breach of trust for possessing a stolen handgun. and working with organized criminals, including a man dubbed Frank the Tank, allegedly running a gambling ring. Madeley was swept up in Thursday's announcement.
Yeah, and Madeley was going on Instagram and posting photos of himself loading a gun on Instagram. Because that's what you'd definitely do if you were a police officer who was involved in organized crime. You'd go on Instagram and you'd be acting like a gangster and you know, putting up videos of yourself holding a gun up to the screen. How stupid do you think people are? I mean, how can anyone not see that's fake and it's just staged and part of an operation? There's no way, if a cop was really a part of this, that he's going to go online and do that. No one would do that. We know that's completely fake. And Instagram and all of these social media sites are completely controlled as well by the Five Eyes intelligence services. So they'll just have officers staging a skit like that, and he was obviously told to do that as part of this fake story, which they had prepared probably behind the scenes for some time now. And now they're bringing it out. But yeah, he's going to go on Instagram, if he's actually involved in organized crime behind the scenes, and start waving a gun around on Instagram. Yeah, that seems legitimate. That's definitely something you'd do if you were a cop who was involved in organized crime behind the scenes.
Alongside his son, the father-son duo among 8 current and former officers charged in the probe.
Personally, I'm mortified. I'm saddened to hear whatever.
Yeah, you look like you're... Look at those eyes. Look at those eyes on this guy, man. Have you ever seen the eyes of a shark? The dark, empty eyes of a great white shark? The type of eyes that a psychopath would have. Just empty eyes of someone who would come on and lie about these things and pretend that something's been done about it, while all the while working behind the scenes with criminals so that these activities can fully continue. Look at the face in this guy and look at those eyes, man. This is a psychopath here. He doesn't know what empathy is. He would sell out his own children and his own family members for the flimsiest material gain. And that's what all these criminal high-level Freemasons in the police, in the fire department, and in all these organizations who have been put in to infiltrate these positions to push the agendas of the elites, that's the type of person who's there. He's not capable of empathy. He lies openly, and he would lie about anything on behalf of the state.
The scale of Thursday's announcement astonishing to observers. Some believe it could be the biggest case of police corruption in Canada ever.
Oh, really? It's even bigger than the fact that the Ottawa police were involved in staging the Parliament Hill fake terror attack? Even bigger than that? I mean, I guess it must be bigger than that since CNN and their cameramen openly showed an Ottawa police officer looking directly at their cameras and laughing, bursting out laughing while holding an automatic rifle during what you and all these other mainstream media organizations told everyone was an active shooter event. And the other things as well going into that case, we won't go into them now, but there's extensive evidence showing that that was completely fraudulent and that it was misrepresented and that it was nothing more than a drill which they used to deceive the public and try to deceive the public into thinking that all this fake terror was going on so they could justify more surveillance and bringing in more armed cops carrying automatic rifles everywhere.
Not had experience to anything of that magnitude.
One accused, Timothy.
So what they're talking about when they say that is it's one of the biggest cases that the fake Mockingbird media have ever put out, because what really goes on behind the scenes, they don't report on it. So we know that. I've shown you videos of drug dealers operating freely out on the streets in Ottawa, in areas where the Ottawa police are always around. And these media organizations won't show you anything about that. I've shown you video footage of people smoking crack openly in transit terminals in Ottawa, while these Ottawa constables are there all the time, know that these people are there and allow them to do it. These media organizations won't report on any of that. Here's the same story being presented in the exact same way by City TV News. That's another thing. They give you the illusion that there's these various different news organizations, and because of that, people are supposed to be conned into thinking that there's, you know, some freedom of thought. But all of these organizations are putting out the exact same propaganda, and you can tell that they're being told exactly what to do and say, and that is because the Five Eyes intelligence services, and namely CSIS in Canada, give them these stories and tell them what they are to say and do. That's why there's no legitimate and real criticism of the things that CSIS are involved in, and that's why you almost never, ever hear any mention of Freemasonry in a negative light in the Canadian media. Never. Nor do you ever hear them even mention that almost all of these police officers who are involved in this corruption are Masons. They keep completely silent about that because a lot of these people in the press are also Masons who have taken oaths to their lodges, and they will not betray those oaths. So, again, you're getting nothing but lies from these Masonic-controlled media outlets. You'll see this is the same type of thing here.
Later in that period of time, they had an interaction with police. It was a violent interaction where one of their cruisers were rammed, and that set off an investigation that led police to realize that there were multiple officers working in collaboration with dozens of organized crime members, and they had essentially flipped and were funneling information as well as their efforts toward organized crime in the city. So everything from drugs to auto thefts, gambling, all kinds of things here being involved.
You don't say. And yet these same police officers who can do all this surveillance to find out all this stuff can't use that incredibly advanced technology to shut down drugs completely. They should know where all of these drug gangs are operating. They should know exactly what's going on. We can prove for sure that they have the ability to spy on law-abiding citizens and track them with this Palantir technology, and also spy on them within their own homes, invading their privacy. But they can't do the same to all of these people who are involved in drug gangs and prostitution rings and all of these criminal organizations. They can't do that, right? And that's also because these criminal organizations are a part of the communitarian system and are allowed to operate. So they have to create smokescreens in the controlled press to attempt to deceive people into buying this garbage. It's utterly ridiculous. It's illogical. If they have all of this advanced technology, they'd be able to shut down all of the drug trafficking within the country. There'd be no drugs out in the streets. They'd shut it down completely. We can tell it's the entire organization within all of these police departments run by Freemasonry who are allowing these things to happen. It's completely illogical to think that they could just use this technology and find that all these officers are corrupt, but they can't find anyone else who is, apparently. All these gangs that they allow to operate freely, who are given heavy coverage, these motorcycle gangs, who are given heavy coverage in the Canadian media. Somehow they're just allowed to operate. All you would have to do is bug their phones, which you obviously have the ability to do, catch them talking about what they do behind the scenes, and you could arrest all of them. You don't do it because they're allowed to operate and they're tied to Freemasonry, just like the police. And the media does their part by lying and covering this stuff up, and that is irrefutable. So one of the major reasons why CSIS and the Five Eyes intelligence services are having their controlled Mockingbird media organizations putting out these fake stories regarding staged arrests of Toronto police officers for corruption is to try and present the illusion that there is some transparency within some of these police organizations. So in other words, that with the corruption going on, that there are some of them that are good and who are looking to do things to stop it. If that were the case, and there were actually good officers who would legitimately stand up against these things, first of all, the entire organization would have to be involved in a situation where they're taking part in a staged event, such as a drill that the media is going on and presenting as real, to present as these fake terror events that they continually use, and these staged deaths that they continually use with community-based agents who have made deals with the states, with the communitarian state, to get added benefits to take part in these staged events. That could only happen if the entire organization was involved in it. It wouldn't be just a case of a few rogue cops staging into that Parliament Hill terror attack. That's too large of an event for that. So we can tell there would have to be involvement from the top down with the entire organization. We also see these Freemason cops all making these same hand signals that are in Masonic manuals constantly. We see them all being told the same things to say and do when they're in front of the camera. So they're all taking part in staged events. And also, every time one of these staged stories comes out to try and present the illusion of transparency within some sectors of the police, do you see anything getting better? Every time the Canadian Mockingbird media organizations put out stories saying, major police drug bust, Ottawa police seize tons of narcotics, do you see anything changing on the streets? No, if anything, it just gets worse, and there's still people being freely allowed to deal drugs right out in the open, and there's still people smoking crack at transit terminals, and there's still people being sent to allow by police to freely commit crimes. The exact same things are happening despite these fake stories that they're putting out. And that's why we know it's all just deceit. And if you read up on the communitarian system and the literature put out by important communitarian writers such as Amitai Azioni, you would come to understand that there is a direct connection between the media, the police, and all these public service positions. And they all have to work as one for what they would determine as the better good of the community or the greater good of the community. The same situation in countries where full-blown communism is in effect. All that matters is what is arbitrarily declared as being for the greater good of the community. There are no rights for the individual. There is no actual individuality, and that's another thing we'll go into at another time, but why they're trying to remove all originality even from content creators online. So they're trying to shut that down so there's no uniqueness. Anything to do with the rights of the individual has to be set aside for the greater good of the community or the mob. And in other words, the mob that they control through lies, deceit, and inversion, and by giving them, by using materialism as a means to control the mob, by giving citizen snitches and people who rat out their neighbors added perks and benefits and using them in organized stalking and harassment campaigns. So another way we can tell this is all fake is that all of these police and these same people involved in these situations that the news talks about, that are talked about in the news, they're still partaking in criminally harassing and stalking law-abiding citizens in their countries. So again, there are no repercussions for these actions, because if they were worried about repercussions, they wouldn't be partaking in such things. They would be worried about repercussions, right? I've witnessed Toronto cops, when I lived in Toronto, sitting in their cars and drinking open alcohol and laughing while they continually stalked me while I was trying to do my job as a security guard to keep the building secure where I worked, while they harassed me continually with no repercussions. So if they were worried about repercussions in any way, and if our judicial system wasn't completely corrupt and controlled by Freemasons, do you think that they would act that way? I mean, are they that stupid? It's just like what the media, that nonsense fake clip that the media showed of that cop going on Instagram and waving his gun around. If this was real, there's no way that he'd be stupid enough to do that. So we can tell that this is all contrived, and there is thorough evidence which exposes this as completely contrived. And the media, the police, and large numbers of community-based agents work in unison to push the agendas of the state, and that means openly deceiving certain segments of the population into relinquishing their rights. And to do that, they use all of these continual staged events over and over again in the media, and the police take part in this. So there's a direct connection between all of them. Therefore, nothing they say can be trusted when they've been proven to be liars over and over again and again. So all of the Canadian propaganda networks, all reporting the exact same story that was given to them most likely by CSIS. And what do these intelligence agencies do when they realize that, some segments of the public are waking up to their gross corruption and the criminal acts that they're involved in? Well, they use their control of the media to deceive the public into thinking that some action is being taken. For example, what did the CIA do when people started to catch on to the whole situation with MK Ultra? Well, in the 1970s, they started, I think it was the 70s, or was it the early 80s? At any rate, they started staging all these fake press conferences where they brought people in from the CIA and admitted to some of the things that had gone on with MK Ultra and to these victims of these things that the CIA had done. And of course, they put out all these media stories covering this and had all these staged press conferences in conjunction with the people involved in it, the CIA, who actually control the American media completely. So the American media were told what to say and do, and to bring the CIA out there and make it look like they were remorseful about these things. Meanwhile, after all these staged press conferences, what happens? Where the CIA says, oh, we're no longer doing these things anymore, and we've ceased Project MKUltra operations. Right after that, it continues on again. It just continues on, and nothing changes, and these things get worse, and they continue to do the same things. So that's how these intelligence agencies operate, with their control of the Masonic press.
It all began with a dramatic takedown last June near Toronto. Officers watched from above as suspects rammed a police vehicle in the driveway. The case leading investigators to uncover a murder plot.
Yeah, sure they did. And notice the key word dramatic, how they fit that in there. Dramatic, i.e. dramatized, staged. You can see the type of technology they're using there with AI to make it look like they're doing all this amazing surveillance on these people. Yet somehow you still have hard drugs all over the place, freely available all throughout Canada. Look at the streets of Vancouver. Look at the streets of Toronto. Somehow people are able to continually get their hands on drugs, and you have dealers operating right out in the open, but they can't do any sort of a sting on those people somehow when the cops are right around those areas. Again, it just shows you it's illogical, and this is ridiculous and completely staged. And you can just tell they use community-based agents to take part in these staged events alongside the police. And what you have to know, if you are not a part of the communitarian system, is they have huge amounts of people who know fully well that these things are going on, and that the police are partaking in these things, and they work to insulate them. And of course, they get a lot of material benefits on the side for doing that, and they are basically the paid false witnesses, paid liars, paid informants of the state, and they will do anything the state asks them without limitations. Unfortunately, many of them will. And so they have all those people on the payroll, and those people are paid to lie and insulate the police involvement in drug trafficking. And when I say police, I mean the whole organization, all of the police forces throughout Canada, Masonic controlled, and utilizing paid witnesses to cover these things up and partake in staged events. And this is just another staged event here. The arrest was, I'm sure, completely staged. And as is the case with the Canadian judicial system, all you're going to see in the media are these sketches of what supposedly went on in the courtroom. So your only source of information for what supposedly went on in the courtroom where these trials are being held or will be held is the Canadian state-controlled propaganda networks who lie to you about everything. So obviously they could easily just lie, and our intelligence services can put out these fabricated documents to make it seem as if some of these officers are actually doing prison time, and just give them false identities and start them over elsewhere doing the same things again. That's how it works. Canada's organized crime syndicates run entirely through Freemasonry, and no negative talk is allowed in the controlled media about Freemasonry, nor are any of these people allowed to draw the obvious connection between Freemasonry, police corruption, and organized crime. And as I said, as you can see here, the courtroom sketch here, and that's all you get. That's the only piece of evidence that would show you that any of these trials for these officers are actually even going on, is some sketch that somebody did, and then they put it out, and you know, your only source of information on any of these supposed trials are the controlled Canadian propaganda networks, or Rebel News, who are essentially the same as the controlled Canadian propaganda networks. They just present you with the illusion that they're for freedom and all of this too. So those are your only sources that any of these trials are even happening. It's quite clear that these are fabricated trials, and that no one's going to do any prison time, and that this Masonic corruption is just going to continue.